Um, so, firstly, good evening. I'd like to share with you this evening, obviously as normal, I had several ideas on the Parsha, but I'd also like to incorporate within the share a few ideas, reflections on the two great leaders of world Jewry who passed away this week, Rabbi Sachs, Zichrono Livracha, and also Rav David Feinstein, who also passed away on Erev Shabbos, I believe, last weekend.
Sorry for interrupting. Apologies. Could you record this for those people who aren't able to attend?
Yes, I believe it's being recorded. I think Aaron organizes that it's being recorded. Yes, it is being recorded.
Thank you.
Parsha begins by Yu Chayei Sarah, Me'or Shana Shev'esrim Shana V'Sheva Shanim Shnei Chayei Sarah. The very first word, Vayihiyu Chayei Sarah, is a word which the Meforshim pick up on because it's surprising. It is an unusual way to refer to the life or the passing of any figure in the Torah, particularly when it comes to tzaddikim. So you find the Toras Chaim tells us the following thing. He says, Tzarich ladas, he says, Lama Oma Vayihiyu, V'lo Oma Kaseda Oma B'chol tzaddikim, with all tzaddikim, he says, you find Vayichi Odom, Odom lives such and such a length of time, Vayichi Shem, Shem lives such and such a time. Or even the words Eile Shnei, these are the years, just like it says with Avraham Avinu. He says you can understand the word Vayihiyu with a Medrash Tanchuma. The Medrash Tanchuma says that the reason, the cause of Sarah's passing was when she became aware of the Akedah. The Kimat Shelo Nishchat, the Medrash says, and it was almost that he was shechted. Parcha Nishmasan, she passed away on hearing that news. And according to this, says the Toras Chaim, the passing of Sarah was because of hearing about Yitzchak. And the hint to that is in the word Vayihiyu, because he understands the word Vayihiyu implies pain, implies trouble, implies tsar. That is the implication of that word Vayihiyu, and the life of Sarah implies somehow, maybe perhaps something sudden, something unexpected. And he gives another slightly different pshat as well. He says, in the similar vein, that had it not been for this instance, the Akedah and the impact that had on her, she would still be alive. So Vayihiyu therefore means, as in Havaya Chadosha, it was a new existence, it was a new story, it was something different. It was something different than what she had expected from her life. It means a Havaya Chadosha Meshunis Mea Kitzva Shekotzva Yomea Shekitzva Yomea Yosei. Her life was supposed to be longer. Vayihiyu Chayei Sarah. Unexpectedly, they took a different path, and she passed away at the age of 127. So what we have through this understanding is we have the description of a life that ended in a way that was unexpected, that was sudden, that was not in the path that people expected it to be. And it could be that with this understanding, we can understand specifically why it is here that Rashi, the very first Rashi on the Parsha, points out to us this idea that we're familiar with, that Rashi says, why does it say Shana each time, the year each time? Because each one should be expounded of its own accord. Bas kufka bas chof, 100 like 20, lechet for sin, ma bas chof lechato, just like the age of 20 she didn't sin, sharina bas onshin, because she wouldn't have been punished at the age of 20 for certain things. Af bas kuf belechet, even so too at the age of 100 without sin. Ubas chof kebasayin liyofi. And 20 years old is like the age of 7. She was like the age of 7 for beauty. Why is it that with Sarah, specifically with the life of Sarah, the Torah wants to tell us this idea, this message? And it might be because it is specifically with a life that demonstrates to us that it didn't follow a predetermined script, where everything followed according to plan, where she lived out the number of years that she expected to live, or that everyone expected her to live. Specifically here, the Torah has to emphasize the idea of appreciating each and every stage in life, the idea of living in the moment, of appreciating each moment. As Rashi says in the next Rashi, Shnei Chayei Sarah, the years of Sarah's life, Kol on Shovin Atov, They were all equal in terms of their goodness. Kulan Shovin Latova, they were all equal in terms of good. Does that mean she didn't have any difficult times in life? Presumably not. It's an attitude, Kulan Shovin Latova, to go through life in a way that they all seem equal. In other words, to appreciate, to live every day in the best possible way, to make every day Kulan Shovin Latova. That meant that even though her life took a different path than the one she had expected, she was able to live life to the fullest and to achieve the maximum in life. And how did she do this? This is this idea, perhaps, when Rashi says she was bas chof kebas zayin leyofi. When she was age 20, she was as beautiful as age 7. The question is well known. Beauty is achieved with maturity. Why is it that when she's 20, she's described as being as beautiful as the age of 7? Rav Soloveitchik says that the idea is that there is a beauty and innocence of childhood. Because once we get to the age of 20, we become sidetracked in life. We become more cynical. We look at life each day with those slightly jaded eyes. When someone tells us a moment, an idea of inspiration, we think, yeah, but who knows? You know, I've seen this before. People have told me this in the past. But a 7-year-old wakes up every day with new eyes. You watch a 7-year-old. 7 is a wonderful age. 7 is an age where a child has already achieved the ability to express themselves in life. They can contribute. You watch a 7-year-old round a Shabbos table. You see that they're engaged, they're participating. It's not like a 3 or 4-year-old, right? Where they're just, playing along a bit, whatever. A 7-year-old is engaged, they're learning, they're open. Every day is open for a 7-year-old. There's the beauty, the innocence of childhood. That is the bas chofka bas zayin liyofi. That is a 20-year-old being as beautiful as a 7-year-old. That was how Sarah lived her life. And when we can achieve that, then we have a chance, perhaps, of bas kufka bas chof below chet, that 100 to be like 20 without sin. Because if we can live a life of expectancy each day, of wanting to achieve the maximum from each day, then we can truly achieve everything we're meant to achieve in life. And then the question is, who lives this? Who is it who lives this in practice through the rest of the parsha? The answer is Avraham Avinu. And here I refer to a beautiful, profound idea of Rabbi Sachs, Zichron Livracha, who explains and asks us to look at Avraham Avinu in this parsha specifically. He's 137 years old. He has just been informed that his wife has passed away. And what does he do? He mourns her. He does everything that he needs to do. And then he pushes on immediately to try and realize the very two things that he has been told that he will achieve in life. That he will achieve a mokom, a place in Eretz Yisrael, the land, a part, ownership of the land of Israel, and that his descendants will have a future. So he buys a plot of land to bury Sarah, his first acquisition in the land of Israel. And he looks for a shidduch for Yitzchak because he needs to realize that continuity. Avram is driven by a sense, a mission, a purpose. The only eitzah he has, the only way he can live his life is through an ideal of Kulan Shovin Latova, that all the days shall be equal for good. I have to make them equal for good, however difficult it might seem at the time. To keep going, to keep building. And that is why we have at the end of the parsha, Ve'ele shnei chayei Avraham asher chai. And these are the years of Avraham Avinu asher chai. What does it mean, asher chai? He lived, he truly lived every day. Every day of his life he lived. He had that sense of mission and purpose. He made every single day count. He made every day Kulan Shovin Latova, all days being equal. There are many incredible tributes that have been paid to Rabbi Sachs over this week. The immense impact he had on so many people's lives, the number of people whose lives he changed through one conversation, a passing conversation. It's an incredible thing. But above all, he was driven by that sense of mission, of purpose. Many people commented on the fact that when he retired from the chief rabbinate, he could have put up his feet and said, I need a bit of space, I need a bit of quiet. But he did the exact opposite. If anything, he came into his own at that moment. that sense of mission, a sense of purpose, driven in that way to achieve the maximum each and every day, because he cared about building the future. He cared about the next generation. He cared about passing on the torch so that others would be able to continue the message after him. Yehei zichro baruch, may his memory be a blessing for us all, because our task is that much greater for all of us, each and every one of us, with his passing. I'd like to now move on to, later on in the Parsha, we have the recounting of Eliezer, Eved Avram. Eliezer looks for a wife for Yitzchak. He's sent to find a wife in the land of Haran. And we know the well-known Rashi. Rashi says, quotes Rabbi Acha from a Medrash and Bereshis Rabbah. It's on Pasuk Chov Dalad, Perek Chov Dalad, Pasuk Mem Beis. Rashi says, Omer Rabbi Acha, Yofes Sichos Shlav Avos Mitzeros and Shalbonim. The speech, the deliberations of the servants of the Avos is greater than the Torah Shalbonim, the Torah of their children. Shari Parsha Shel Eliezer Kfula B'Torah. The Parsha of Eliezer, the whole story is told twice. And you have many things in the Torah that are only said with just a hint, just a remiza, they're just a remez, they're not even mentioned in great detail. And, we're familiar with this Rashi, we learn this Rashi every year, but nevertheless, the question still remains. What is it that we can learn from that second recounting? What is it that there is to teach us? I'd like to suggest two separate pshatim, two separate explanations. They're not my ideas. One is from Rav Dessler, and the other idea I saw Rav Fran discusses. I think both of them beautifully complement each other in terms of what we can learn from this particular parsha and the length of the description. So Rav Dessler says the following thing. Rav Dessler says that if you have to derive lessons from the narrative, the length of this narrative. And he says, if you look carefully and you compare the way in which Eliezer recounts the story to the first time when it actually happens, you'll find several differences. He says, Eliezer, when he recounts the conversation that he had with Avram originally, he mentions the question, right? The question that he asked Avram, that he said, maybe she doesn't want to come with me, right? This is when he recounts the story. And he says, this is, if you want to follow, this is in Perek Chov Daled Pasuk Chovtes. So he says, maybe she won't want to go after me. But if you compare it to the original conversation, he doesn't recount what he originally had said to Avram, which was, if she doesn't want to count, shall I take her back to the land that I came from? Shall I take her back? Shall I go back, to the land that I came from, try and find a wife for them? He doesn't say that. He doesn't say that. And then, of course, we have this difference between, as Rashi picks up on here, with the word ulai, right? Here it's written Eli, to me. And Rashi says, because really Eliezer was thinking and hoping that she should go to him, that he should marry his own daughter. That's what Eliezer was really hoping for. So the word ulai, perhaps, ulai lo selichosh, is spelled to me, Eli to me rather than perhaps. Says Rav Dessler, because the question there, of course, is the same. Why is it that this is the question in the reverse? Why is it that the Torah doesn't spell it out earlier on, right? In other words, when the actual conversation takes place, there the Torah should have hinted at this. There the Torah should have spelt it in that way, the word Eli to me. Why is it that in the first instance, it's spelt in full, ulai, perhaps? Why is it only now? So Rav Dessler uses both these examples to demonstrate the power and the effect of both self-interest and unconscious bias. He says that he brings one more example, which is also very important. He says like this. He says Eliezer also leaves out in his account the order in which he gave the jewelry, right? So he gives firstly he ran to her. What actually happened was he ran to her and he gave her the jewelry. He was so excited, he was so happy. But when he actually recounts it, he says it in the other way around. He says, first I asked her who she was, and then I gave her the jewelry. So why does he change that? So Rav Dessler says like this. He says that everyone has a field of vision in this world, in the real world, where it's determined by the strength of our eyesight. As far as we can see, if you look at something in the horizon, that's as far as you can see. You cannot see further. Whatever is outside your field of vision, you cannot see. It is invisible to you. He says the same principle works in the spiritual world as well. A person can only see as far as their spiritual horizon, the spiritual level they have attained, allows them to see. Beyond that, you can't see anything. You can only see as far as you've been able to, as the level that you've achieved in life. For example, he says, a person who hasn't worked on their own natural selfishness, he says, can't grasp the actions of some people that are completely unselfish, completely selfless, just can't understand it because it's something beyond their field of spiritual vision. That's what Dessler says. So he says, with that you can understand, number one, why does Eliezer change the order of narratives, the order of the narrative? Because Eliezer, in reality, presented her with the jewelry because he knew exactly what would happen. He knew. He was so sure. He was so sure that her answer would be yes. He was so sure who she was, even before he'd asked her about her family. But he realized that Lavan and Bethuel were not on that level. They weren't on that level. They were limited in their vision. They wouldn't be able to accept that any sensible person could act in that way. They would have seen it as foolish. And therefore he reversed the order because there's something that was beyond their field of vision. And he says as well that the same restriction on the way we see the truth of things can be affected by our own self-interest, our own bias that we have, even and especially bias on an unconscious level. When Avraham Avinu sent Eliezer on this mission to go and find a wife for Yitzchak, Eliezer says, perhaps you won't want to come with me. And it can't there. He didn't mean to me at that stage because he was sure, he thought, obviously, he genuinely thought that his daughter could be considered. He expected Avraham Avinu's reply to be, well, obviously, if there's no one there, find him a good young woman from the land, from one of the Canaan. From the Canaanites, which meant his daughter will be absolutely a suitable candidate. He wasn't conscious of his personal bias at that stage. And that's why, because he wasn't even conscious of it, the Torah spells out, well, perhaps, because he wasn't aware of that bias that he had. Only when he speaks to Lavan and Bethuel, then when he understands how Yitzchak's wife has been chosen in Shemayim, has been guided by Hashem, only at that point does he become aware of his unconscious bias. He becomes aware of the bias at that stage, and therefore the Torah now introduces the word Eli to me, because he is aware of that bias. When he recounts the story, that's when he becomes aware of his own bias. And that is also why he leaves out the second part of the question. He doesn't say that I said to him, should I return Yitzchak to the land of Canaan? Because now he realized that was an impossibility. Now that he's been through the story, he now sees himself that was never on the cards. Because he now finally understands. He sees how his own bias presented itself. Says Rav Dessler, we learn a fundamental lesson from the recounting of the story of Eliezer. We learn the story. We learn the idea that to discover our own hidden motives in life, to discover our own unconscious bias, to discover the ways that we think we know in life, when really there is this bias that is driving us, when we see that, when we feel that, we can discover the real truth, the real emes in life. That's the first idea, which I think helps us understand this parsha. Second idea, Rav Kotler says that the key thing we learn from Chazal say, what did Chazal mean when they say that we learn more from the speech, the sichoson shel avdei avos, yosem mitzeroson shel bonim. We learn more from the speech, from the description, the dialogue, the ordinary dialogue, the stories around the avos. We learn more from the Torah of their children. What does he mean? He used to say it like this. He said in Yiddish. He said, Torah can medarshanin. You can darshan Torah. You can expound Torah. Aber midas tovus darf man ois lernen. You have to learn personality traits. Midas, you have to learn. You can't talk about midas. You can't darshan about midas. You can only learn them by example. And he says That is why the Torah goes to such lengths on even the description of the servant of Avraham Avinu, because Sefer Bereshis is Sefer HaYoshar. It's the Sefer, the book of the upright. And we can only learn what it means to be a Yosher. We can only learn what it means to have Midas Tovos if we follow and watch by example. We see the way people behave. We see the way great people behave. That is the only way. That is the only way. There is no darshaning. There are no droshes. There are no talking about it. It doesn't work. You just have to watch. And therefore we watch Eliezer. We watch in detail every step of Eliezer, because that teaches us how to live. That teaches us menschlichkeit. And Rav Fram, when he quotes this idea of Aaron Kotler, he tells a story how he was at a retreat in America, and he was sitting at a Shabbos table together with David Feinstein, Zechron Levrocha. It gives you an idea of the David and his father of Moshe and what they represented. Someone brought someone over to who wasn't from Atul. They brought him over to Rav David Feinstein, and he's talking with Rav David, and he asks, while this man is talking to Rav David, he asks him, who is this individual? Who's this man who's talking to him? And he said, this is a guy who used to live on the Lower East Side. He lived in the same neighborhood as the family of Rav Moshe. And Rav Fran said to them, does this man remember anything about Rav Moshe? And he says, yes. He remembers one thing about Rav Moshe Feinstein. This guy had sadly become non-religious a long time ago. He says he remembers one thing about Rav Moshe. He said when they used to play hopscotch on the streets of the Lower East Side, and Rav Moshe would walk down the street, Rav Moshe would wait until the kids finished their game before continuing his walk down the street. 40, 50 years later, that was the one thing he remembered about Rav Moshe. He lived on the Lower East Side, and he remembered the way he would wait for the kids to finish their game. He remembered the menschlichkeit of the Gadol Hador. Everyone who has met Rav David Feinstein, I had the chus of meeting Rav David several years ago. I spent a long time with him. I met him, and it was the only time I met him, sadly, but it was a long conversation. I had a meeting with him, and I discussed various things I wanted to talk to him about his father, about Rav Moshe. Anyone who knows anything about Rav David Feinstein knows that he was the epitome of an Onov. He was an incredibly humble person. His midas, just someone who saw nothing of himself. He was probably the leading posek in America, walked around with what you say, an ordinary hat, a short jacket. You just would not know that he was a major Rosh Yeshiva, a major posek. He was so humble. They say about him that they used to have, they say about him, they used to have they asked a number of people how, what are the three people they'd most like to have around their Shabbos table. Right? And people suggest, I like the Briskerov, Moshe Rabbeinu, I don't know, whatever. And Rav David Feinstein said, the three people I would most like around my Shabbos table are three aniyim, three poor people. I can be mechabed around my Shabbos table. That's what he's interested in. Those are the three people I'd most like. And this was the man he was. This was the man he was, a person whose actions spoke louder than words, that people learned from through the way he lived his life, through his conduct, through his behavior, and through his anova, through his deep sense of humility. May his memory be a blessing for us all. I want to continue, finally, just conclude with one final idea. So Pasuk Samach, Perek Chof Daled, is a long Perek. The Perek Chof Daled, Pasuk Samach, a Pasuk we're all familiar with. Rivka, when Rivka is about to leave, they give Rivka a bracha by Yomerula, and they said to her, Achoseinu, our sister, at hayila alfei revovo, may you be a thousands of myriads, v'yirash sarich, may your descendants inherit a shar sonaov, the gate of their enemies. Now, this pasuk we're obviously familiar with because for many, many, many generations, we have been knowing, Klal Yisrael knowing to say this at a Bedekan. It is the bracha that was given to the first kala, or the first bride of the Jewish people, and so too we give that bracha subsequently to all kalas of the Jewish people in the future. And when we give this bracha, it's important to understand the depth and behind it and what it means. It's important to understand what it means. So the second half of the bracha we understand. Yirash Sarech Shar Soinov, your descendants will inherit the gates of their enemies. It sounds like a strange phrase, but of course it's an exact parallel of the bracha that's given to Avinu in the end of after the Akedah. In other words, he's given the bracha. The Malach says to him, "V'yirash sarich, kivarecha varecha, etc., etc. I will bless you, and v'yirash saracha shar oivov, and your descendants will inherit the gates of their enemies." So the tefillah is that may you be the one from whom the Jewish people stem, that you are the fulfillment of that bracha. But the Kli Yakar here has an incredibly, incredibly beautiful shot. He says like this. He says the essence of Avraham Avinu and his family, as we know, is Gomel Chesed. They did Chesed to others. That's what they did. Chesed, kindness to other people. They had Oyavim Rabim as a result. Those who do Chesed to others, they have Oyavim Rabim. They have tremendous people who love them, who care for them, who are concerned about them. Avraham Avinu did Chesed to everyone he came into contact with, and so too did Rivka as well. What they were saying to her was as follows: At hayila alfei revava, continue doing that chesed, that kindness that you do, the kindness that you do, continue doing that to thousands of myriads. At hayila alfei revava, be there for others, be there for those thousands of people, do kindness to others. And you know what will happen as a result? V'yirash sarich shar sonov. When you have a moment of difficulty, when you have a moment of trouble, all those people you've helped and supported, the At Hayila Alfei Revava, they will come back and help you. They will then repay that favor to you. You will have, if you go out of your way, they were saying, to be La Alfei Revava, to be do chesed to others, then you will have Oyavim Rabim, you will have people who always care for you, always love you. And then Yirash Sarich Shar Ovav, you will be able, your descendants will naturally inherit the gate of their enemies. They will defeat their enemies because they will come and stand up for you when you need them. Kli Yakar's pshat is not the poshet pshat. It's not the straightforward explanation of the pasuk. The simple explanation of the pasuk is it's a bracha. You should have many, many generations, many children, many descendants. But the Kli Yakar learns it like this: you be there for others. You do chesed, you do kindness for others, and it will always come back to you. It will always make sure that you have a strong future for yourself, because they will come back and defend you when you need that defense the most. And I think there is a beautiful, beautiful, therefore, according to that pshat, another really, really beautiful, if you like, explanation as to why we give that bracha to a kala just before the chuppah. Because what is the whole, the chuppah, the four sides, the open, the chesed, the idea, your home, make your home a place of chesed, a place of kindness to thousands of people, and then you will receive the brachas, then you will receive the brachas of protection and all the brachas that you need in life. So with that, on that note, may we all have a wonderful Shabbos full of many brachas and mitzvah Hashem. Hopefully this should be a week of simcha rather than sorrow for Klal Yisrael, and I wish you